Week 1, Unit 4, Egyptian Religion. Well, Egyptian religion is very complex and complicated, and we can just give a brief overview here, but we can still touch on some of the most important points. The first thing about Egyptian religion is that, like all ancient religions, it's polytheistic. That is, there are many gods that each representing different parts of life or nature or the universe. And this is a picture here of one of the most powerful and important of the Egyptian gods, the god Ra. The god Ra is the sun god and creator god. He often merges with other gods. Here he has the head of a hawk, which is often the sign of the god Horus, which is another god we'll be talking about soon. And in this picture, Ra, the sun god, is represented sitting with Amentet, who is the goddess of those who are buried in the West and may also be a manifestation of Isis. This is another thing about Egyptian religion, is gods can sort of blend into each other, and one god can be a manifestation of another god. It's complicated, and of course it's a system that sort of evolved over 3,000 years, though it's remarkably consistent over that period of time. Well, this is the central family group of Egyptian mythology: Osiris, Isis, and their son Horus. Osiris, who is sitting on the left, is the god of the underworld, and we'll talk a little bit in a minute about how he came to be the god of the underworld. Next to him on the right is Isis, who is the sort of ideal wife and mother of the gods. She also represents nature and magic. She's a very powerful figure in her own right, and Isis worship actually spread way out of Egypt and was very popular in the Roman Empire, and was actually a rival religion to Christianity in the early years of the Christian era. But anyway, this is Osiris, Isis, and their son Horus. Horus, who's shown here as a small baby, grows to be one of the most powerful gods in the Egyptian pantheon, and he's a sky god who's associated with the pharaoh. Well, Isis and Osiris are brother and sister, and this is common in ancient mythologies. There's a kind of incestuous structure where gods can only marry other gods, and this was reflected in the way that the pharaohs arranged their affairs as well. And they're brother and sister and children of the earth and sky, so they sort of combine the elements of human life. Seth, the god of disorder, gets them into trouble. Here's an image of Seth, who has a god of chaos and the desert. He tricks Osiris into a coffin. He has this wonderful coffin. He says, "I wonder who could fit in this." And Osiris, perhaps somewhat foolishly, says, "Oh, I bet I could," and climbs into the coffin. Seth then seals the coffin, kills Osiris, and dismembers him, tears him into a million pieces so that he can never be reincarnated. Well, Isis is intensely sad about this, and there's this wonderful statue of a mourning woman who's thought to represent Isis mourning Osiris. We don't know for sure that that's it, but it sure looks like it would be. And her tears are thought to cause the Nile flood, so you can see how this story of the gods and their families influences nature and so on. Osiris is been torn into pieces, and Isis goes searching for him, and she searches all over Egypt. She can find every single piece of him except one, which is, significantly enough, his penis. She puts them all together except for the missing part, and then he becomes the king of the underworld. And he can't be brought back to life, but he can rule in the underworld, which is enormously important in Egyptian thought, and thus Osiris becomes one of the most powerful gods, paradoxically, by being dead. Horus, his son, avenges him, and here's a picture of Horus. Horus is represented with the head of a falcon or a hawk, and he's associated with the pharaoh, and you can see here that he's wearing the pharaoh's crown. He defeats Seth, avenging his father, and he's also thought to be connected with earthly rulership. He's the sun god, S-O-N. He's the son of the older gods, and so he's more connected perhaps to humans. And the pharaoh was often thought to be an incarnation of Seth, and this is why we see, for example, if you remember in the Narmer palette, we see an image of a hawk or a falcon with Pharaoh Narmer, and we can see Horus here wearing the pharaoh's crown that combines the crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt. Well, what everyone knows about Egyptian religion is that it's associated with mummies and the afterlife. And a mummy is something fairly simple. It's really just a body that's been prepared for burial by first drying it out. It's an elaborate process. The word mummy comes from the Arabic word for bitumen, mumia, but bitumen was not used in making Egyptian mummies, so you can see this is a much later term for these preserved bodies. How do you make a mummy? Well, what they would do after someone died was they would quickly remove the internal organs before decay set in. They would leave the heart in the body because it was felt essential. The brain, on the other hand, was not felt to be essential at all, and it was removed by sort of taking an iron hook and putting it through the nose of the corpse and pulling the brain out in pieces, and the brain was actually discarded. They saw no value in it. Other parts of the body, other organs, were taken aside and preserved separately, put in special jars called canopic jars. There were 4 jars for each mummy with different parts of the organs in them. Then, once the organs and internal viscera had been removed, the body would be packed with natron, which was a naturally occurring salt. And this would dry it out over a period of many days. Then it would be wrapped in linen bands, and you can see the bands there wrapping the head. Charms, metal charms, would often be placed in the linen wrappings at appropriate places. And then the body, when it was fully dried and wrapped and covered with charms, would be placed in a coffin. For commoners, a simple wood coffin would suffice, but for pharaohs, you would have multiple coffins of wood, of gold, and of stone. The important thing in most cases was that on the outside of the coffin, you needed to paint or carve some eyes so that the body inside could see out. And we see here there's this kind of literalism in Egyptian thinking about death that's very interesting. The idea that the body won't be able to see unless you put eyes on the coffin, which in one sense, is very symbolic. It's the eyes, but in another sense, it's very literal. You've lost your eyes with death, and now you need new ones. The tombs of the wealthy were filled with objects or models of objects that would be needed for the afterlife, and this is most of the stuff that's in a tomb like King Tut's. And one of the things that they found in King Tut's tomb was hundreds of walking sticks, because Tut had trouble walking in life, and it was assumed that he would need this afterwards in death. This is Thoth, the god of knowledge and the inventor of writing. Thoth has the head of an ibis, a bird. And Thoth is important for his invention of writing, of course, of hieroglyphics, but also for the ceremonies that go on after, in the spirit world, after a spirit had died. And we'll talk about this in some detail. Here is an image of the weighing of a heart of a man named Hunefer. And what was thought was that after a person died, their heart would be taken by Thoth, and you can see Thoth here. He would take the heart along with Anubis, who is a wolf or jackal-headed god who protects the dead. So you've got the god of wisdom here, and the protector of the dead here. And then Anubis, who's also represented here, would put the heart here in the balance, and a feather on the other side of the balance. This would all be, the weighing of the heart would be supervised by Osiris, who's represented here sitting on the throne with his characteristic green skin that he has as the king of the underworld. So here's a close-up of the heart and feather that are being weighed by Anubis. You've got Anubis in the center, the heart is here, and the feather is here. The idea is that the heart is weighed down by the sins that it's committed, and their lists of sins have been left over, that survive from the period. And for example, the person should not have killed anyone. They should not have stolen anything. They should not have had sex with someone inappropriate, such as a young boy. They shouldn't have committed adultery. They shouldn't have insulted the king. They shouldn't have damaged the neighbor's lands. They shouldn't have tampered with instruments for weighing grain. In other words, they should have lived an appropriate life following all the rules of Egyptian society. And if their heart was weighed against the feather and the heart was lighter than a feather, and that's pretty light, then the spirit would be free to go to the land of reeds, which was sort of the Egyptian idea of heaven, which actually was pretty much like Egypt. It was a agricultural land by a big river with, sort of bountiful crops and so on, only it wouldn't have any of the horrible things that troubled Egyptians in life, like disease or pain or hunger or anything like that. Heaven was imagined as a sort of ideal version of human life. If, on the other hand, the heart is weighed down by sin, then the spirit is devoured by the monster Ammit, who is sitting here. And Ammit, interestingly, is a combination of a lion, a hippo, and a crocodile, who are the 3 large creatures that might have actually eaten you in ancient Egypt. And it's wonderful that to think that the monster that's going to destroy the souls of the evil ones is also based on the actual real-life animals that would have preyed upon the people of Egypt. Well, all of these processes are described in a text that survived from ancient Egypt known as the Book of Going Forth by Day, which we commonly refer to as the Egyptian Book of the Dead. And here is a papyrus sheet from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and it shows there's a boat here being carried into the afterlife. Ra was thought to ride through the afterlife on the boat of the sun at night, and you can see all these connections here. So very complicated notions of the afterlife and of judgment, which, as we can see, have carried on into other religions and have parallels in other religions. Lastly, not only humans were mummified. Other animals were too, especially cats. The Egyptians saw the cat as a sacred animal, and so cats would be mummified, and here are some mummified cats.